Hello, my name is Elijah Winfrey.
And I'm Patrick J. Burnett.
And we're here to do a audio commentary for Ballad of Billy Badass, but we don't want to do it like all the other audio commentaries. We also have a drinking game for you, okay? So if you're somebody who drinks adult beverages, check this out. Every time you hear an F-bomb in this movie, Patrick, you want to demonstrate that real quick?
Fuck!
We want you to take a drink, okay? Every time Axel gets abused or disrespected, take a drink. That could be him getting slapped. That could be him getting cut off while he's talking. Doesn't really matter. If he gets disrespected or abused, take a drink. When Mr.E gets mentioned, finish your drink. And when somebody dies in this movie, finish your drink.
We're calling it the Quad City Drinking Game.
That's right. That's right. So we are going to be having some behind-the-scenes stories for you, too, but we also want to have fun with this whole thing. So thank you for watching this, by the way. If you've already seen the movie and you want to goof around with us, we appreciate it. Are you ready, Pat?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, so go ahead and start the movie now, folks, if you're listening. So the movie opens up with a voiceover from Brian Wolf out of Cleveland. Met him online through Wolf Rock Radio, and he was nice enough to supply our opening theme, or I shouldn't say theme, opening monologue. So that was really good. And obviously we open up like 3 seconds into this movie killing the president, but there's a reason for it. So
yeah, the whole idea is just to represent the total collapse of typical society. Kind of what's going to happen if the government's not in charge anymore.
And I should make a mention of this because I've talked about it before. Like, when I first wrote this, I wrote this back in 2013. I did not know, obviously, what would happen in 2020 when we were actually filming this. But I know for Patrick and I, like, there was a lot of kind of going through it going, holy crap, is this actually happening right now?
It was a little jarring. It was almost like an episode of The Simpsons where they predict something before it happens. We had written it long in advance, and then all of a sudden, some of the stuff that was taking place in the story was actually unfolding, like protests that were happening in real time, where actually there's some sequences in the opening where it's stock footage and stuff like that was implemented just because due to the coronavirus we weren't able to visit as many locations and have as many extras as we would have liked.
And this movie was made on a $5,000 budget. Majority of that money went into the people in the film because we wanted to really invest in people. And as Pat was just saying, you know, we had planned on doing like multiple fundraisers, like trivia nights, things like that. And we had to cancel all those things because of coronavirus, which those of us who lived through that, you know exactly what we're talking about. Everything was closed. So there are some parts in this movie where we had to kind of come up with a backup plan, and we'll let you know what parts those are. And there's also just some good times to be had. So again, before this finishes out the little monologue that's going on now, the rules are, if you hear an F-bomb, take a drink. Axel gets abused or disrespected, take a drink. Mr.E gets mentioned, finish your drink. Somebody dies in this film, finish your drink.
Man, that is a good-looking pair of legs.
So we're showing the spiral camera movement of Patrick and I, or I should say of Patrick. I was the one filming it. But I'm a big Joel Schumacher fan, so I wanted to have my Schumacher moment like in those 90s Batman films, so we got to do that with Billy Badass. You'll notice that Robbie Eccleshaw is seen in the credits, but he's not seen in the movie. The reason for that is he actually was in Canada, so during coronavirus, he couldn't come over and play Deacon like we had planned. So we wanted to still include him in the credits because he did all the script reading, so that's why you'll see Robbie Eccleshaw mentioned in the credits. Also, as Billy's walking, there's a couple people that walk by him. I don't want to give it away, but I will say pay attention to that. Maybe go back and rewind that and look and see who's walking right beside Billy.
Yeah, they definitely will. They'll definitely be integral to the story later on.
So we're getting ready to meet all the different bosses from all the different districts, and I'm going to let Pat talk about this because you're probably going to notice it a couple times throughout the movie where it goes from, well, Pat, you tell them.
All right. Well, first, let me mention the situation with like him walking through the fields and stuff. That wasn't really the plan because it almost makes it look like after everything's gone to hell in a handbasket that it's still a beautiful world out there. A lot of that was just, that's the closest we could do as far as making it look like there wasn't anything out there, almost like it had kind of gone back to nature owns the world outside of the cities. So that's why it doesn't look like a bunch of decrepit sets and stuff like that. Now, as far as this first meeting goes, what you're going to notice first and foremost is our main character, Billy, portrayed by myself, has a very distinct haircut. And the reason for that is, it goes without saying, especially if you have an eye for the sort of thing, that Billy's wearing a wig. And a poorly done wig at that. Now, the reason is we had looked into... So, when you make a film, you make a lot of sequences out of order. And we hadn't shot this yet. And unfortunately, I was in a situation personally where I had to get a haircut. And we really needed to film those, so we figured, okay, it's not a big deal, I'll get a haircut. And we had a lead on a really realistic wig that was going to look just like my real hair before it had gotten cut. But unfortunately, we weren't able to secure the wig in time, so I kind of had to go and get a Halloween wig and try to cut it to make it look somewhat like my real hair, which in some spots doesn't look terrible, but unfortunately in other ones you can see it looks a little off. But that's very much the reason why.
So, kind of a fun game to play at home. Can you notice what scenes he's wearing the wig in and what scenes he's not? Obviously, we gave it away. This first one, he is wearing a wig, and by now you've already taken like 3 drinks because of the F-bomb rule. So,
so as you'll see, there's a little David and Goliath thing happening there with the deacon, played by Justice Cross. So, as Eli was saying, originally Justice wasn't involved in the project, but he was able to be a last-minute addition as Deacon. He did an amazing job, despite having very, very little prep time. But it works. The visual representation is meant to be that even though Billy's big, he's like a bull, but Deacon is small and precise, almost like a martial artist. It's not about size and the way that he moves. It's about very direct points that make it where he strikes. He was a boxer in his backstory, so he's all about precision hitting, where Billy is just about brute force. So ultimately, they have a dynamic there where Deacon's character is more of a threat in reality.
and for my Johnny Love character, the gentleman in red, I got to give a lot of credit to Chris Griffin, our makeup effects artist. You'll see a lot of his work throughout this film. He was the one who did all the prosthetic scars on my face. And what's so funny about it is we had filmed all my other scenes in this movie prior to this first one that you're seeing right now. So by the time we got to filming this, we actually finally figured out how to do the prosthetic scars, because it was kind of a trial and error thing as we went along. So Chris made the joke of saying, now that we don't have to do it anymore, now we figured it out. Go figure.
Yeah, Chris is a really good VFX artist. Unfortunately, he was not a good makeup artist as far as the wigs department goes, so I couldn't call on him for that.
Yeah, we had to go outside, and so this next person that you're going to see is Kat Kova. That's her stage name, and she is playing the role of the representative. And it's funny because this line here, I say you're only good for 3 things: to fuck, to make a meal, and to bear children. And when we did that line, I didn't want to say it directly to Kat because I'm not like that as a person, but the character says it. So I said it off camera, and then we brought her in to do her part. And when we brought her in to do her part of the reaction to me saying that line, I told her to smack me in the face, and she was a little like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And I said, "Yes, smack me, because you would smack me if I was saying it to you as a person." And so she definitely smacked the shit out of me. So I had to, do everything I could to, not cry in that sequence.
Harrison Ford actually was a little bit of inspiration there, because a lot of people don't know this, but Harrison Ford had a saying when he was filming his part as Han Solo for the Star Wars film. He said that as far as the writing was concerned, George can write that dialogue all day long, but you can't say it. It just doesn't feel right to say that and have it come across the screen as genuine. So as Eli was saying those kind of things to Vienna just made him super uncomfortable. It's the dialogue you can write, but not the dialogue you can say. But ultimately, Kat's performance really countered his uncomfortability with her very striking, dominant presence.
Very much striking, yeah. So here we got Deacon talking about what goes on in his district. Again, I'm assuming if you're watching this that you've already seen the film, and so you're not like, guys, be quiet so we can hear the movie. So we're going to talk about this whole thing. So if you haven't seen the film, go see the film and then come back and play this drinking game with us.
Otherwise, you might want to turn the audio commentary off because you're probably drunk.
So I got to give a lot of credit to Cody Dennis, because the building that we're filming in was, I believe, one of his family members' business, and it used to be an old elementary school, and so it looked very decrepit the way that we wanted it to look, and we were so lucky to be able to film in there. So I want to thank Cody and his family for letting us do this. And actually, this part here that you're seeing on the screen, that doesn't look like that anymore. If you were to walk in there now today, it actually looks very nice. So it was kind of like the last hoorah anyway for the way that building looked before they updated things. And I will say, obviously right now we're using a microphone. We did not have microphones when we filmed this movie. We were using basically the camera or the microphone on my phone, because this movie was filmed on a cell phone. So that's one of the things that has been updated for future productions, but I didn't think it'd be that bad. It was raining that night, though. It was like, it wasn't a hurricane, because we don't get hurricanes up here, but it was like a pretty significant storm.
We had a significant rainstorm, yeah. And yeah, to Eli's point, you may look at this film and think that it's a little grainy or the sound's not as good. Originally, the plan was to use Panavision cameras, which you can actually rent. And those are the same sort of digital cameras they use for film productions in Hollywood and Atlanta and film productions elsewhere. And we had a line on boom mics and all the usual production equipment that you're supposed to use or I shouldn't say supposed to use, but that normally would be used in the industry as a standard. But again, because of coronavirus, not to make it sound like a broken record, but unfortunately that really hampered it as far as being able to get a hold of everything that we wanted. But we were really determined to get this movie made and get it out as quickly as possible. And our thought process was, with everything going on, we didn't know what was going to happen with the coronavirus, how long it was going to last, the impact that it would have on the world. So we wanted to get something out there that was a passion project that maybe could be something people would enjoy and maybe even inspire somebody else to make films. And this is a small town, it's a small community where this was filmed. And so we really wanted to take advantage of the fact that we wouldn't have as many issues per se with having to concern ourselves with making people sick or as many regulations and stuff like that. It still allowed us to film without really hindering the project as a whole.
And I will say too that one of the main reasons why we were so determined to make this film is because I had tried to make this film 3 times prior. And for whatever reason, those productions didn't work out. And it just kind of felt like, not to be dramatic, but it kind of felt like a curse on this movie, because every time I'd get a team together, something would happen where the team would fall apart. So we finally got our team together for this, and then coronavirus hits, and it's like that's when myself, my wife, and Pat, we kind of all had that conversation of like, we're not gonna not do this. Like, we're so damn close to actually doing this thing. Like, let's get it done. And this was only supposed to be one movie and done, and now I'm doing more movies afterwards. And I think that, obviously this team of people that I was so lucky to film with, is a big reason why.
And, we figured if nothing else, it would be in the same vein as movies like Chronicle or The Blair Witch Project, not so much in terms of storytelling, but in terms of cinematography, because they are both done in an almost found footage style, but still taken seriously as though it's a POV of you witnessing these events unfold in real time without all the flashy camera work.
So right now we're meeting Axel. Heard his voice earlier, but now you're meeting Axel. Axel is Billy's brother. And what you're going to find out throughout this film is that Billy and Axel were both adopted. And we thought that would be an interesting way of having two brothers on screen that you don't normally see. So that's our way of explaining why they don't look alike. Is again, they're both adopted. But they love each other very much. And obviously Billy is the older brother, Axel is the younger brother. Right here you see Patrick kind of up against the wall talking to a crowd. Well, because of coronavirus, we didn't have a crowd of people, so I had been taking a master class from Martin Scorsese where he talked about how in one of his first films he didn't have access to a bunch of people, so he would film the actor up against a wall and then add the sound in later. So that's what we decided to do with this. And now we're actually in the Messina Fire Department, which we were allowed to film in. They have a little banquet area, so we were able to use that as our bar, and it kind of fit that they didn't have a bartender there because it's Quad Cities in the poorest district. So now you got to take another drink because Axel just cursed.
So this was actually a fun little sequence. This was the first scene that Cody and Dennis and I had shot together. And what made it really interesting was we had to keep making takes because both of us were kind of giggling at each other. And what you won't see is we didn't want to worry about any sort of issues with like marketing and licenses, just in case the film managed to take off, which it subsequently has since filming is wrapped. But we were trying to play off those old bottles as just the two guys having a beer. So we had to keep turning the label so that you wouldn't see the actual soda label the whole time. And we kept getting it caught in the camera, so we had to keep spinning it over and over and over again so that you wouldn't ever catch the actual name of the soda on it.
And because we're doing a commentary, we can say the name. Patrick, how many Coca-Colas did you have during this? Because I'm pretty sure you got sick of it by the end.
I had quite a few. The urge to pee was immense. I will say I was sitting there filming that the whole time with what I can only say must have been a very enlarged prostate.
Oh my God.
However, it was delicious. And this is, members folks, this is pre-zero sugar, so Billy could stand to have a couple of sodas without it going straight to his hips.
So this next person that comes in, next two people actually that come in, were relatives of Cody Dennis, and we needed extras for this particular scene, and Cody supplied them. We literally met this guy, Steven is his name. We literally met Steven like 30 minutes before we filmed this, so I got to give it up for him for doing a good job. And Axel's getting disrespected. You better take a drink. Actually, I think you have to finish your drink on that one. Is it finish or take one? Oh, it's take one. There you go. Yeah. What you get, if you're playing the drinking game, you're probably already like loaded at this point. But we figured it would be more fun that way.
And it's so funny because it being Axel, because it's Cody's actual relative, he was already used to him telling him to shut up. See?
Take a drink.
That's just another family picnic.
That's
for
a
Mr.
double.
Dennis.
That's a double because he said shut the fuck up. So that's an F-bomb and a disrespect. So take two. But the actual point of this scene is just to kind of hammer it home that, Billy feels an immense weight to do right by himself and his people in his district. And he's starting to realize the only way he can do that is by taking out the other districts and taking control overall. And this story of him trying to give medicine, what he can give to this guy's family, and it not working is like one of the last straws.
Right.
Before he goes on that journey.
He tried to play by their rules, and he's quickly realizing that the only thing they really care about is seeing Billy get snuffed out, and then taking advantage of whatever resources he has, and ultimately they could care less what happens to his district, his people, or collateral damage.
And Axel is kind of the school of thought of, we need to follow the rules. We need to listen to the people who are currently in charge. Let's not rock the boat because we're already in the hole. Rocking the boat might, bring more attention to ourselves than we want. Which I think if anybody works in retail, you probably understand exactly where these two characters are coming from.
Oh yeah.
Maybe not as dire circumstances. No one's going to come in and kill you, but I think you get the point. You have the folks who say rock the boat, and you have the other folks who say, no, I kind of like it on the boat because I can't swim. So
I don't see anybody in this scene asking for credit card apps, so it can't be too bad.
And of course, each mob boss has their own background. That was something that I had done, where each mob boss had like 10 pages of background story outside of Billy. Billy really didn't, so Patrick kind of had to develop that as he went. But the other ones, they had that background information, which, as an audience, you don't really see that throughout the film other than with Johnny, but it was important to me to give my actors and actresses as much as I could to help them get into character, because I find that to be helpful as an actor myself, so...
Yeah, like Eli said, a lot of times you'll find with a film they have what they call the Bible, and ultimately it's a production book with backstories, character appearances, storyboard ideas, script treatments, pretty much anything that helps fill out and round out the story. But with Billy, even though he was the main character that Eli had originally conceptualized, and then him and I kind of spent about a year fleshing out, at first I wasn't going to play the character. I was gonna help him just write it. We were gonna find somebody else, and then ultimately we realized that if we wanted to get it done, it had to be me. So I kind of just took autonomy and said, okay, what do you think about this look? What do you think about this behavior? And I kind of just took control of that character and ran with it within the spirit of what he had written. But Billy really didn't have exact definitions of who he was going to be. It was more or less just what his mission was.
Yeah, and I will say too, a lot of credit goes to Patrick, because my original script for this was 28 pages long. The script that we ended up filming was like 120. So yeah, we added a lot of stuff. In fact, Axel's whole story wasn't even included in my original script. It was just kind of like a boom, 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 go and try to kill the different mob bosses. And we added a whole another layer to it when Patrick and I kind of collaborated and worked this thing out. So very thankful for that. In this scene, they're back at the factory. That's where all the folks that live in, District 1, underneath Billy's control, that's where they all kind of work, is at this factory. And you'll notice that we have these emergency food boxes. And the idea behind these emergency food boxes, and I'm not sure that we really conveyed this well enough in the film, the idea behind them is Billy's people are packing these food boxes to send somewhere else. Even though they're the ones that need the food, they're having to feed other people with these boxes against their will. So that's kind of the idea. And then this scene here, listen, I love like Scooby-Doo. I love just random comedy stuff. And so I wanted to have a little bit of comedy. And we were able to do that with James Quant, and Cody Dennis, and actually Cody's wife, who she wasn't his wife when we filmed this, but she became his wife afterwards, Kaylee Dennis, and you'll see her kind of walk into frame here in a second. But the whole idea was just to have a scene where, you know, we consistently see Axel get disrespected. What would it look like if Axel didn't get disrespected? So that's kind of the fantasy being played out here.
And even though it's just a moment of levity, it also serves to show that Axel's starting to become disassociated with his reality. And the one thing he wants more than anything is to gain some sort of power in his own life, and ultimately he will carry that power as far as he can. So you're starting to see the seeds of rot begin to grow in him.
Seeds of Rot sounds like sounds like my next garage band. Seeds of Rot.
The Seeds of Rot.
There you go. By the way, he just got disrespected, so you are going to need to take a drink if you're playing the drinking game with us. By the way, you can play the drinking game whatever type of drink you want. We really don't care. It could be adult beverage. It could be water.
Blow bubbles in your chocolate milk, whatever you feel like doing.
Yeah, we just thought it would be fun. So just have fun with it. We're not trying to, contribute to anybody's issues.
It's the Seeds of Rot.
The Seeds of Rot with Patrick Burnett. That's a podcast.
The Seeds of Rot with PJ.
So this scene here was one of the last scenes we filmed, which is why you will notice sometimes there's leaves on the trees and there's leaves not on the trees in other scenes. That's just because of how it worked out. But I was having to film, hold the camera, and hold a Lysol container all at the same time so that we could spray some type of gas that would knock Axel out so that he could be captured. And this is actually the first scene we actually filmed in this entire movie was this one. Believe it or not, as you're watching, we're already 26 minutes in. This was the first scene, and I gotta give a lot of credit to R.W. Martin. He had come over from Vermont, and a couple things about R.W. He's been in the business for a long time. Been doing a lot of independent movies. A lot of his stuff was more comedy oriented, so this was an opportunity to do something kind of dramatic, but still have pieces of comedy in it. So I think he knocked it out of the park. He was also extremely helpful on set. He was only here for like 3 days, but when he showed up with not only costumes for himself, but a bunch of props and extra costumes in case anybody else wore the same size as him and needed something different. So he was super helpful when he was here, and this scene, I think he really nailed it. And I've told you what, if you are playing the drinking game, you're about to hear a whole lot of F-bombs that you're going to have to take drinks on, so you might want to go grab a refill now.
You might want to grab a plate of snacks, maybe a bag of chips, something to...
Alternate.
Yeah.
Water, then take a drink.
Make sure you hydrate.
So we wanted to work in, again, kind of like I was talking about before, we didn't have a lot of extras. So in this scene, there's supposed to be people in the room with Cody and RW. And so we kind of played that as like an off-camera thing, and here you go. And I kind of thought that would be funny, like all of a sudden in the middle of his interrogation, oh, well, yeah, we should have got this poor guy a towel. There's 1. 2. You can count them at home, but we would have lost track by now trying to count all these. At some point, I will watch it, though, and try to count all the F-bombs, Patrick.
Well, most films would really do to have a intimacy coordinator, which we didn't need, or some kind of a producer or someone on set to help kind of remind us of maybe something we should have been keeping an eye on. Considering the MPAA, that's the Motion Picture Association of America, does ratings for films, and you're allowed so many F-bombs to get you're allowed 1 for a PG-13 film.
Yeah.
You're allowed a handful of them, and I mean like maybe 5 for an R-rated. And then beyond that, we go into NC-17 because it's considered too filthy for normal audiences. And this film, we had no one, because of the way it was shot, no one was really paying attention to the language. We all just sort of, in many ways, there was a lot of improv.
Yeah.
So we kind of just said whatever felt the most natural to us. So as you can see, this entire film was made by a bunch of dirty-mouthed individuals who probably set a Guinness record for the word fuck, or its lovely variation. It's cousin fucking all throughout the film.
And motherfucker. You can't forget that one. That one's in there a couple times.
Now, this is a very special scene happening right here. This was a big deal for Eli. That's actually his wife, Cassandra, who plays the character of Johnny Love's girlfriend. And Eli, go ahead and tell the audience what's going on.
So as I was saying earlier, like each mob boss had like 10 pages of backstory. Well, Johnny's backstory is that he is a baseball player and he loves his girlfriend. Girlfriend gets pregnant while they're kind of still in high school. He has the opportunity to go be a professional baseball player, but 2020 happens. So he's kind of got to make a decision whether he's going to stick around and have the kid and be a dad, or if he's going to go out and play professional baseball. So he chooses to stick around and be a dad, and right now he's talking to his girlfriend's brother, Marcel. And Marcel is kind of like, dude, are you really sure this is the right time to like bring a baby into this world? And one of the things that I love when I did see people react to this movie is that obviously in that first scene, you know, Johnny's saying all those, you know, misogynistic things of, you know, you're only good for cooking and having sex with and that sort of thing. And then in this scene, he kind of looks like he's pro-choice. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to really conflict people. Because at first you're like, I hate that guy. But now you're like, I don't know. Like, he seems like I'm not condoning his behavior, but I can kind of see where the seeds of rot were planted, if you will. By the way, we're going to put t-shirts out with seeds of rot. But
Seeds of rot.
Seeds of rot, that's right. So we wanted to really conflict people, and I wanted to show a side of Marcel that we don't get to see now that Johnny's Johnny. Because before he was hardened by what happened to him, which you're about to see in a second, he was actually a decent human being. And then because he lost his child and he lost his girlfriend in a horrific incident, now he fills that void in his soul with all these things he shouldn't. So that's kind of the idea behind this, is to kind of show who Johnny was before all of this. But because it's from Johnny's perspective, he is an unreliable narrator, so you don't know if you can really trust what he's saying or not. But we didn't play too much on that side of things. We just wanted to kind of show you some of his backstory, because we wouldn't have been able to work that in otherwise, because it would kind of take away from the rest of the movie.
Disastrous circumstances really show you who you are. And, you know, this movie kind of plays out like some people are born monsters, and then circumstances kind of create monsters out of good people. So in Johnny's case, the whole idea is he's almost like a mirror for Billy. Neither one of them were necessarily bad men when it all started, but then they become the largest enemies to one another, and they really mirror each other in that way that tragedy ultimately shapes them on a collision course with one another. And really, you'll kind of see for yourself, and you kind of have to make the determination for yourself as you watch the whole film, is, are they bad men? Are they good men? And what would you do if you were in their shoes?
Mm-hmm. I agree with that, and I hadn't really thought about that until just now. So that's a good take from Patrick Burnett. See, we told you we were going to give you little nuggets in here that you're going to be like, wow, that's actually thoughtful outside of the drinking game.
Not to mention, I used Noxzema to clean my face when I was a person, you know, a teenager. Seeds of rot over here.
Oh my god!
Really didn't take good skincare.
So I got to give it up for Jim Moscatello in this scene, because Jim plays Marcel. And he does a really great job in this movie playing kind of two different personalities in a way. One where he is Johnny's friend, another where he's not so much Johnny's friend. And in this transition that you're seeing right now, where I want you to wake up, one of my favorite transitions in this entire movie, and I take a lot of pride in how this came out. Now, this scene here, okay, I gotta say, this scene here, and any scene where I'm acting in it, is either, it's kind of a combination of folks, but it's either Cody Dennis, Travis Shatraw, or Patrick Burnett. who kind of helped run the camera and things while I was in the scene. Okay, so I am not doing all things at once. I had a lot of help. But I will say that the Coca-Cola bottle that we were trying to smash at the beginning where I first wake up, that stupid bottle would not break. It was like 6 different times before it finally broke, and then Pat came up with the idea that we should have thought of at the beginning.
Just use a sound effect, because clearly that Coca-Cola bottle was made for soundproof or bulletproof glass. 'Cause no matter how many times we all smashed it against concrete, it just bounced like a little ball. And don't let Eli fool you. When it came to directing off screen, he beat us mercilessly.
What the hell?
We were all mistreated.
Well, come on now.
I'm only here right now at gunpoint. We really didn't have a chat. That bat, he's like Negan from The Walking Dead, and that bat, he threatened to beat us all to death while he was whistling.
No, that's not what you're supposed to say. Anyway,
just picking.
So the walls behind the characters, and this is something that like I really enjoy, and you actually will see this on other features on the Blu-ray if you're watching on the Blu-ray or YouTube or whatever. But the walls were actually burnt orange, and through lighting we were able to make them look red, and we wanted them to be red because Johnny is red. Johnny wears a lot of red. And basically the situation, the scenario that's playing out in this scene is that somebody has stolen from Johnny Love. Johnny doesn't know exactly who has stolen from him, so he is interrogating 2 employees that Marcel has brought to him. And that's the thing you got to understand about Johnny's district. Johnny is not a hands-on boss. He only shows up when there's somebody that needs to get killed or beat up. So Marcel really kind of runs that district, and Johnny kind of does all the fun stuff, whereas Billy's a little different when it comes to that.
Yeah, Johnny's very much a troll in his dungeon.
A district manager.
Yes. And he only shows up when it's time to drop the hammer, and the rest of the time he's pretty much just in his cocoon of narcissism and self-pity.
So this water that you're about to see as it's getting drug in here by Jim Moscatello had to be the most disgusting water I have ever seen. We went to Walmart. I'm pretty sure I can say this. We're not going to get sponsored by them or nothing, but we went to Walmart and we picked up like a whole bunch of Jell-O packs and like random food coloring and stuff. And so you'll see what I do here with the water, but it's just absolutely disgusting. I would not have drinking this, but Christian Fino, who was playing this character here, he also plays other characters in the movie too, which I'll talk about that in a second. I don't know how he actually drank any of that.
Like, kudos to him. That was real commitment on his part.
And look at it as I pour the water out. I didn't realize we were getting this shot, but look how disgusting it looks as I pour it out. That was clear water when we started. Just absolutely disgusting. So I did want to say, James Quant and Christian Fino, they played multiple roles in this film, and they did a really good job, I think, of playing different characters throughout the film. So I want to give them a shout out because it's hard enough playing one character, but I think both of them played like 3 different people in this film. Yeah. So I got to give it up for them because they really helped make this movie what it is, so I appreciate them for that.
Yeah, we were all a close group, so the whole idea was it's not likely any of us are going to get sick, but at least it made the most sense that we continue to all just circulate around each other instead of bringing somebody else in on the mix. So pretty much everybody wore multiple hats. The actors, like he said earlier, 3 of us were also directors. 3 of us also helped kind of write a couple scenes on the spot when needed. Jamie and Christian were multiple characters. Eli himself actually had to portray a couple of characters, though off screen, as to not cause a great deal of confusion.
And I gotta give a shout out, not necessarily a shout out, but I just want to kind of give a behind the scenes story here. So in this scene, obviously we talked about earlier how there are 2 people who have supposedly stolen from Johnny. One of them is mute, and that character is played by James Quant. So as he's getting drowned, you'll notice he's pointing at a note in his pocket. And Johnny gets that note, sees what's on that note, and basically by the end of this scene, the idea is that Marcel brought these two guys to Johnny as a sacrifice, essentially, even though Marcel is actually the one who was stealing from Johnny. So the joke here is that the mute guy is the one who snitched. And they think about that for a second. A mute guy wouldn't be the one that would snitch in that situation. So that was kind of what we were trying to convey. I don't know that came across, but some people have gotten it. Other people have not gotten it whenever they watch the movie. But yeah, basically Marcel was trying to, I guess you could say he was thinking, if I bring people to Johnny now, then it won't be such a big deal later.
That would be our mascot, the figurehead of Elijah Winfrey Studios that you may have just heard, the lovely
Slinky Dog Winfrey.
The lovely Slinky Dog Winfrey. So, as you can see, Johnny's kind of on to Marcel's game now. However, the one thing that, I wondered as an audience member, because I wasn't present for the scene, was, and this is actually a scene that Eli wrote on his own, was why doesn't Johnny immediately take Marcel out? And you kind of have to look at it like Johnny only lives for the purpose of causing himself more pain. He's not interested in his position necessarily so much as he's almost like a sadist to himself, and he just wants to cause himself as much pain as possible because he feels like that's all he deserves.
So you'll also notice that throughout this movie that Billy has a couple of different outfits, which might lead you to believe that we had a costume department, but we really didn't. Everybody on the film pretty much supplied their own costumes. So Pat, talk a little bit about the different costumes that folks are going to see Billy in throughout this thing, and your thoughts behind those, because I thought that was really intriguing.
So when you first start out this film, you're going to see, you see Billy's wearing jeans and a leather jacket and kind of a raggedy shirt, and that's kind of just his everyday wear. Now, the outfit he's wearing now is more like a soldier wears, green and stuff like that, about to go into battle. He's wearing greenish gray colors. That's kind of his guerrilla warfare uniform. Like he's gearing up, he's getting ready to go to war. And then as the story progresses, you'll see that he wears more tattered clothes to infiltrate a more worn down district, and then eventually he wears his big hero costume at the end with a little bit of humor behind that, as you'll see when the film plays out. And again, I don't want to say that as though you've watched the movie, so if you haven't, for the love of Pete, turn it off and go watch the movie. But If you haven't, I certainly don't want to spoil it for you.
There are some people out there who do watch the special features before they go and watch the film.
Exactly. So we don't want to give.
We don't know who we're dealing with here.
Exactly.
So in this scene, you're about to see something here that's going to come into play later. So you see Axel putting the hatchet behind him.
It's my hatchet.
So he's doing that, and Billy doesn't see him do that. Because he can kind of tell the situation's getting a little heated between him and Billy. Now, it was not my intention to make it seem like he would ever hurt Billy, but he does know that Billy is obviously gearing up to go, and he doesn't want his brother to leave because, like we said earlier, and was already established in the film, Axel believes that if Billy tries anything to rock the boat, everybody's going to die. And so if he has to threaten Billy with the hatchet, he will. But I think more so he's like, well, I'll just use it as like a conversation thing to get Billy's attention if I have to, and he never does that in the scene. But I mention that because Billy does notice the hatchet.
Right.
At some point in the scene, he notices it because he mentions it at the end, and then the point of that was to show kind of just how street smart Billy is.
Right. It's never meant to appear as though Axel's about to stab him in the back. Like Eli said, it's really just meant to portray that he's attempting to intimidate Billy into not doing anything, which Axel knows is far-fetched, but that was kind of the best thing he could think to do at the time. So, you know, I felt like, so me and Cody Dennis, we didn't have a lot of time to really rehearse this scene before we started doing it. And I think it works out pretty well because Cody does a very good job of portraying a frantic and anxious person, brother to Billy, citizen, you know, and ultimately Billy plays very good against that as just being his dominant, bullish self and pretty much telling Axel, this is how it is. I don't really care if you like it or you don't like it, and that you need to start standing up for yourself. Because Billy does notice the hatchet that he has, and you know, the one thing about Axel is that he doesn't stand up for himself. He doesn't follow his brother in that way at all. He's very submissive to the world around him, and that's a part of the story for him that needs to change, and ultimately slowly does throughout the events of the film. You know, to quote Aaron Eckhart in The Dark Knight, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain, and that's sort of the slow arc that you kind of see unfold with a lot of these characters, is just their morality and their humanity really gets questioned as the story goes on, and you're not sure who to root for by the time the credits roll.
And I will say, too, that one thing you're going to notice with Axel, and this is what I'm hoping frustrates audiences, and it kind of has from the folks who have already seen the film, he has so many opportunities to tell Billy that, hey, listen, these guys came to me, abducted me, interrogated me, and it was all about you. He could have just told his brother at any point throughout this film, and he never does. And what I'm playing on with that is it's kind of like Judas in the Bible. Like, I'm not trying to throw religion on anybody, but it's kind of like the story of Judas, where, you know, Judas could have not betrayed Jesus Christ, but he did. And so in this, Axel kind of betrays his brother because he as the movie goes on, he keeps not telling his brother what's going on, even though he has the opportunity to do so. Now, to him, he's doing that because he believes foolishly that will protect his brother. But really, it's just hurting his brother because his brother's continuing on his journey this entire time. And what you're about to see right now is actually another cut that I was really proud of. So we filmed this in Cody Dennis's parents' basement, and they were nice enough to let us use their house. But as we go up, we actually transition into a completely different location 30 miles away at a trailer on Travis Shatroff's property, but we made it look like he was walking out of the basement and up to the first floor of the building, and this is where Billy and Axel live. And we wanted it to look kind of grungy because it's two dudes living together, and they're not going to really have a nice, clean house. This scene here is where we first meet Stephanie. Now, Stephanie was Billy's girlfriend and is the mother of his child, Elizabeth. He wants to go see her to let her know what's going on, and this was like a really, really emotional scene between Billy and Stephanie, but it was originally supposed to take place in a restaurant.
Yeah, it was supposed to be an old rundown diner, and they were supposed to have that was also supposed to be like the food storage for the district, and Stephanie's character was
kind of like the food pantry worker.
Yeah, she was kind of the charge for the cafe. People would come to her for their supplies and stuff like that, and she was the one that really ran it. Ultimately, again, we weren't able to film at a diner, though we did have one lined up, but it shut down due to the virus going around. So we filmed this at Cody Dennis's apartment, and we sort of used the kitchen table as a more intimate setting, and essentially set it up as this is Stephanie's place, and she's got a couple of things of food laying around that she can spare. You know, nothing extravagant. But at this point, you know, food is so scarce that they're going on a couple of spoonfuls of food and stuff like that. Like, people are starting to get very thin, and you know, resources are dwindling, and so that's kind of the whole point of that. So it might seem a little odd that she doesn't really give him much for supplies and stuff like that, or there's not much for decorations around. It's because there's really not much for her to be able to give to him. Now, this was actually a lot of fun to film. Unfortunately, as you can see, the dreaded wig has made its return. Originally, we had intended to shoot the scene with Stephanie, Stephanie's character. This was a wonderful actress by the name of Stevie Lynn. She did a fine job, and but unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts and stuff like that, we weren't able to film a little earlier. So that made the dreaded wig return. We were able to do a little bit of practice over the phone, just for social distancing reasons. So this was our first meeting kind of in person and being able to film. So we just shot all of our scenes in one evening, so that we didn't have to worry about a career woman having to struggle with her schedule and her home life and such. So, but we felt like the scene really plays out quite well here. Stevie and I had very similar sort of mannerisms that kind of played off each other. So we both felt that this scene was very natural. The chemistry was definitely there.
And the idea here for folks who have seen the film, just to confirm maybe what you already thought, in the foster home that Billy and Axel were in, so was Stephanie. So they are not related. Like, we're not trying to make anything awkward or weird.
This is nothing from Alabama land.
They're not related, but they did grow up in the same system, if you will. And that's how they met each other. And obviously, as they got older, Billy fell in love with Stephanie. Stephanie got adopted by a different family. But distance didn't really matter because they were bound to be together anyway. And so that's kind of what we're playing off here. Now, obviously, they had a falling out, and we never really discussed what that falling out is. In fact, Patrick and I never even discussed what that falling out was. So insert your own, choose your own adventure, I guess. Maybe it was about something silly, like what movie to watch that night. I don't know. But they had a falling out.
I actually have a pretty solid theory as to the falling out, being that because Billy had no choice but to take over the district, ultimately Stephanie would have been put in harm's way, and he knew that. He knew that Stephanie and Elizabeth both would have been in harm's way, and Stephanie didn't agree with that. So Billy ultimately left her just to protect her. He felt he was doing the right thing, which ultimately, whether you agree with Billy or not, everything he does is always because he feels like he's doing the right thing. So a little self-righteous on his part, but I think ultimately that's the thing, is he told her, we're done, keep your distance, just to keep her safe.
I like that. We'll roll with that. That's a lot better than my argument over movie night. So
I really think it's because she didn't like pineapple on her pizza, and he did.
He said, we're getting nothing but pineapple pizza.
We can't do this, I love pineapple on my pizza.
That's right.
I think it's disgusting, and so we have to go our separate ways.
That's right.
She was a Pepsi girl, and he was a Coca-Cola boy.
So this shot here, where it's showing the close-up of the wig, makes me laugh every time, but we were just trying to hide the fact that it was a wig. Like, listen, we get it. We know. Like, it's very noticeable. But we were just trying to do our best to try to fool you a little bit. But if you laugh at that, that's okay. We laugh too. Okay, so don't feel bad about that.
By all means, take a shot every time you see the wig if you want to.
He's adding new rules.
It ain't Quad
He's
City.
adding new rules.
It ain't gonna be the Quad City drinking game no more, but we'll call it the ridiculousness bonus round.
There you go. We've entered the bonus round now. But just to play off what Patrick was saying, I think Stevie Lynn did a really great job in this scene. Again, it was like the only time that she was filming with us. And Patrick said something earlier that I think is a really good point. We had one physical script reading. We had multiple over Skype script readings because we were still using Skype when everybody else was using Zoom. Now we use Zoom for our script readings. But anyway, we had to do everything that way. And that's not normally how you would do this, how you would practice together. So I got to give a lot of credit to Patrick and Stevie Lynn for being able to play as a couple who has been together and had a child, even though they really had only ever been in the same room like 3 times prior to this night. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. The first script reading we did was very good, but we did feel like maybe the chemistry might not hit once we went to film it. So Stevie and I actually did take a couple of weeks to kind of just chat a little bit here and there and bounce ideas off each other to get comfortable with one another so that we could legitimately portray two people that were scorned by their love that they have for each other, but that they still cared about one another. Because anybody that ever does film or theater or anything like that, chemistry isn't really something you can fake. You either have it or you don't, which a lot of times is why they do like movies where they'll have chemistry readings and stuff. And then, so like if you have your main actor or main actress and somebody's supposed to play opposite them, if the chemistry's not there, they're not going to get the part. But in this case, we went with who was best for the character, and then we were fortunate enough that we were able to find that the chemistry melded very well. So in that way, we really got lucky with everybody in the production, as everybody was very comfortable with one another, and the chemistry with everyone was very natural, and it made the story unfold in a more believable way. Nothing felt forced or fake in that way.
So the song you're hearing right now is called Once a Season by Amelia Sage. So here's what's funny about this. So I grew up in a bunch of different places. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. One of the places that I lived was in Florida. And at my dad's church, and I was like a teenager, one of the worship bands that happened to stop by to do worship service was Amelia Sage. And so I knew about this song from when I was a teenager. Now, they're no longer a band anymore, but I happened to find their guitar player who's in like real estate now. And I hit him up and I said, hey, I love this song. I think the song is great because it talks about, you know, two people who love each other, but they only really see each other once a season, which is perfect for Billy and Stephanie. And I said, can we use the song? And he was over the moon about it and was like, yeah, totally, use the song. So filmmakers out there, you know, it might be something small from your childhood, but hey, shoot your shot and you never know what might happen. Lots of great songs on our soundtrack, by the way, which you can find on YouTube. We'll talk about more of those songs as we see them in this film. Right now, it's the big scene between Axel and Stephanie. So Axel has gotten himself out of the trap that Billy put him in earlier, and he is running to Stephanie to try to talk some sense into Billy, because his attempt at talking sense into Billy didn't work. So he figures Stephanie will be on his side about how Billy should not go on this journey right now. So that's what you're kind of seeing play out here. I think this is one of the best scenes that Cody Dennis did in the entire movie. And Stevie Lynn, she went from filming the other scene that you saw to filming this one in the same night. So it was pretty impressive. And I will say, as a true gentleman, and this isn't shown in the film, but it was behind the scenes, Patrick let Stevie Lynn wear his jacket. So he took care of her.
It was, by the time we'd started filming this sequences, again, these were shot on the later half of the year, when things had started to kind of calm down a little bit. And it was absolutely freezing that night. As a matter of fact, the climax of the film was, I want to say it was something like 10 degrees out. There was a freeze warning, but we were so determined to get it done under the new year that we had a lot of very cold nights near the end of the film. But on this night, it was definitely quite cold out.
But again, Axel's trying to convince Stephanie, like, hey, listen, he wouldn't listen to me. He'll listen to you or his daughter if his daughter says, Dad, please don't do this. And so that's where Axel's kind of coming from with all this. But Stephanie's coming from it saying, listen, I don't want my daughter involved in any of this. She's a kid. She needs to be a kid. I don't want her involved in Billy's mess. We need to trust him that he's going to do whatever he's going to do, and then it's going to work out. All my daughter needs to know is that her father loves her. And I felt like that was a more realistic approach than having her run after Billy and be like, please don't go, because I don't think a real mom would want to do that per se. So we wanted to give her a kind of a place of power to come from in this scene. And Axel, because he doesn't get what he wants out of this, and he's already hurt, and he's highly emotional because he feels like his brother's going to go on this journey and die, he kind of lashes out at Stephanie and is like, look, Billy built you this house. And that was the other thing. Like, Billy built the house that Stephanie lives in with his own two hands because he was trying to, be the family man and make sure that his girlfriend and his daughter had a place to live. So he kind of throws that in her face before they end. And then we have R.W. Martin, who plays Gideon Chase, and as we already saw, Gideon interrogated Axel, but what Axel doesn't know is that he's been following him too. So now, because Axel was trying to help Billy, he inadvertently showed that Billy has a family, which is what Billy wanted to avoid happening in the first place.
Right. Axel's unraveling, and it's going to cost Billy and Axel in the long run.
Right. So in this scene here, I was actually not there filming it because I was actually downstairs getting my makeup done. So Pat, what was going on in this scene?
So in this scene, as you can see, he's wearing a mask, so nobody will see his face, and it was meant to be kind of, like I said, this is like his guerrilla warfare. He just arrived outside the city, or outside this district, and he's gearing up and getting ready for a fight. He's meeting up with Marcel because Marcel's finally decided he's ready to take over the district. He's had enough of Johnny's shit, and he wants to get revenge for what he feels like Johnny did to his sister. So he's Billy's inside man who's going to help him basically get taken before Billy, or he's going to get taken before himself. He's going to get taken before Johnny Love, and it's all a ploy to get face to face because Johnny keeps as far away from Billy as he possibly can outside of those meetings because, like I said, Billy is a mirror for Johnny. He's one of the only people Johnny considers a real threat.
And I will just add to that briefly. In this sequence, Marcel's kind of lying to himself because Marcel's making it seem like he wants to help Johnny. He's like, Billy, you need to come get this guy back off the edge because he's starting to really, really lose it with all these drugs and killing people and everything. And in reality, like Pat said, under the surface, he wants what he wants. But he's playing it off like he's Johnny's friend. So this was a lot of fun to film in a very tight space that we had to film it in. And Travis Yatra and Cody Dennis were the ones, I believe, operating the camera. They had to be because Patrick's got his hands tied behind his his back. But I love how the mask kind of looked in this sequence. And the mask itself is actually Patrick Burnett and myself and many others involved in this film. We had done a Batman fan film back in 2013 called Mindbender Chronicles, and Patrick played Black Mask in it. So that's the mask from that film, and we wanted to incorporate it somehow, some way into this.
Yeah, unfortunately, that production came to a halt, and we weren't able to finish it. So we wanted to kind of, now that everybody was back together, and actually we were able to finish our production together, so we really wanted to play homage to what was ultimately a very special time in all of our lives, and it was the start of many of these lasting friendships.
And obviously, we're in District 2 now, where Johnny is the leader, and Billy's been there for a week. He's been there for a week. He's been kind of doing his thing, going around, setting this whole thing up. And you're about to see the brilliance of Billy Badass. Obviously, we talked about his brute strength, which you'll see later on in the film, but he's actually very brilliant in this, in the way that he makes Johnny kind kind of go away. And I'll let Patrick talk about that a little bit.
Billy is methodical. He knows that the only thing Johnny really cares about is numbing his pain. So he used that to his advantage. And he can see that Marcel's a weasel, essentially. So he pretty much plays them against each other. And he's, in his own way, I felt like Billy's starting to kind of go crazy himself a little bit. Just because of what he knows he has to go through in order to take Johnny out, and in order to take out the other mob bosses and take his place as a successor to the throne, as it will. So this is really his chance to go man to man and say, hey, as smart as you are, as arrogant as you are, as big and bad as you are, I outsmarted you by giving you exactly what you love.
And in this film, pretty much every boss in this film, when they meet their end because of their biggest sin, if you will. And for Johnny, his biggest sin is his ego.
Right. Yeah. A lot of times when it comes to taking down a villain, it's about taking from them. And in Billy's case, he took nothing. He gave him everything he wanted in excess. And just completely played. And I love the way it played out. I will say that we did have some technical difficulties with the wrist scene, but that was done brilliantly again by Chris. That was a prop and makeup effects that they used.
I was terrified when we did that.
Yeah,
because I'm not wearing my glasses, and I'm as blind as a bat when I'm not wearing my glasses. So I'm sitting there, and I'll talk about it as it's happening here. But Chris was like, okay, so we're gonna put a blood bag on your arm, and you have to cut along the blood bag. Don't cut anywhere else. Which obviously, for folks listening, like, well, duh, that's common sense. But for me, I can't see.
And this was an actual box cutter too.
Yeah. Like
this utility knife was real, so we had to make sure that it only went out a teeny little bit.
And this is my big speech that I give in the film. Basically, Billy is given the idea here that the drugs that Johnny took had HIV in them. Somehow, some way, they had HIV in them. And that basically, with all the other things that Johnny already has diseases from, this will eventually kill him. So it's like the kill shot, if you will. So Johnny is looking at it going, I don't want to live anyway. I've been living in misery this entire time because I don't have my family here. So if you're going to kill me, I'm going to kill you. Because I'm going to take all these diseases that run through my bloodline and the stuff you said you just put into me, and I am going to now put it in your mouth, and it's going to go through your body that way. And so it's kind of a sick thing, but as you can see, we were able to nail it, and I'm still alive because I cut the right thing instead of the wrong thing. But this right here was a moment for me that I was super proud of as we whip pan over, and we see Billy laughing hysterically. He says, the drugs, the girl, I made it all up. So he literally talked Johnny into killing himself. That's the brilliance of Billy. He didn't have to use his brute force.
So originally, the idea was that Billy was going to hire a prostitute who had AIDS to sleep with Johnny in order to get him infected with AIDS because he abused and molested her sister and killed her. But ultimately, obviously, again, we only had so many people, so we had to cut that and retool it. So the idea was that we laced his drugs, and the sex kind of happened. The AIDS girl happened, but kind of off camera.
Yeah.
And then we just never really addressed it. So it's more or less that we poisoned him was essentially the thing.
So here, obviously, Billy was never intending for Marcel to be the District 2 guy, and we show that by him giving Marcel his initiation process. So we see the Black Mask here. Again, we talked about it earlier, but this was like a kind of like an homage to our Batman fan film we did. You will see that Black Mask in a future Elijah Winfrey Studios production, but I don't want to ruin that right now. What's really cool is in this monologue that Patrick did, it says, you know, the old saying goes, keep your friends close, your enemies closer. Too bad Johnny couldn't tell the difference. And I thought that was such a really cool line that explains Johnny Love, because he could have taken Marcel out earlier in the film. But he chose not to, because he still somewhere felt that Marcel was his boy. And now they're both dead.
And in addition to that, you know, if Johnny had helped Billy to begin with, Billy never would have been on the warpath to take him and Marcel out in the first place. He would have just kept things as status quo, but Johnny taunted him one too many times and refused to offer any sort of assistance.
Actual assistance.
Yeah.
Because he did say, I'll help you, but you got to kiss my ring. And, like, that's not really actual assistance. So, in this scene here, obviously, we're going back to District 1 after Billy has taken care of the folks in District 2. And this was interesting because we had to cut together two pieces of footage. One we had filmed later on in the production. One we had filmed the first day of the production. So here you're going to see us go from where you see leaves on the ground, unfortunately, to fully green leaves. That kind of sucks. But we wanted to keep these things together because right now somebody else who works for Mr.E is interrogating Axel and driving him to a public place where another character is going to kind of give Axel the business as well. So if you're playing the drinking game, a lot of abuse for Axel is coming up here in the next 3 minutes.
Yeah, don't get ready, you know. Don't forget to grab your water and your snacks and you know, maybe a keg, because there's going to be quite a bit of action coming up here.
Or a hat with the straw, you know?
Yeah, a hat with the straw. Yeah.
So this was actually on the first day of filming, so we filmed the interrogation with Axel getting the water poured on him, and this scene, too.
We were really inspired by Zootopia, so that they would be in a different climate every time we had a shot.
You're funny. But in reality, one of the movies that inspired this scene here is one that Patrick actually encouraged me to watch, which was the assassination of Jesse James. Because in that movie with Brad Pitt and many other people, there's a sequence where Brad Pitt's character goes and he meets somebody who he's got to go take care of, essentially. And they ride out into the woods on their horses, and you know, Brad Pitt's character shoots the other guy. We alluded to that with this line here from Gideon Chase, where he's talking about what he's going to do with Axel and how, you know, it needs to be like the old days. One thing that it sounds like a sound effect, but it's really not. It just worked out perfectly. As Gideon Chase says, "Let's take a ride," there's a car that drives by.
Yeah.
That was not intentional. That was just a happy accident, but it worked out. But basically, Gideon Chase is the right hand of Mr.E. He is the fist of Mr.E, if you will. And so his job is to try to figure out what the hell's going on. And he thought he had an agreement with Axel that Axel was going to, you know, talk Billy out of doing what he was doing, and he didn't do it. So now, you know, Axel gets disrespected and gets his ass kicked.
Right.
And again, I got to give it up for both Cody Dennis and R.W. Martin in this scene. You might be wondering, how is he kicking Cody Dennis? Well, we actually had a piece of cardboard that we put underneath Cody Dennis's shirt. And so R.W. would kick the cardboard, and that's the sound you're hearing. Again, we didn't have access to like huge sound effect libraries like other films do. So we did the best we could. And they have the clearest cell phone connection in Quad Cities because Patrick did all his monologues after the fact.
Right.
But again, here's another opportunity where Axel could have said something to his brother about what was going on, but he's got a gun to his head, so he's kind of like, I shouldn't say nothing.
Yeah, ultimately, You almost feel bad for Axel. He's in a tight spot. You know, he's being threatened, he's being manipulated, and he himself is just slowly unraveling, like I said before. And ultimately, this scene here is kind of a turning point for him.
And I will say I was on the ground filming this too.
Yeah.
Like I was like crisscross applesauce on the ground with my cell phone camera, and I was so happy with how the pan looked because it looked professional, even though I was on the ground and it's just me. Which I'm sure for people driving by that day, that must have been super awkward. Like here's some guy in a field with a gun and another guy's filming it, but it worked out.
Oh, take another shot.
Take another shot. You heard a net bomb. At least you probably heard a net bomb. I'm going to go back and listen to this, and it's going to be super quiet every time you and I pause.
every time, yeah. Just no noise at all.
But basically, Gideon Chase is now saying, you need to feed me information on your brother. I don't need to be waiting for you to come to me. You know, you need to let me know when he does something. So now we're going to go to District 3. And I got to give a lot of credit to Kat Kova in this scene, and at the time, her boyfriend, now her fiance, Tyler, he was not supposed to be filming with us, and he totally like took one for the team and did a great job. But basically, he's one of the enforcers in District 3. He is attacking this person, played by Kat Kova, who plays multiple roles in this film. And Billy doesn't like the way that he's talking to this lady, so now he's going to beat his ass up on top of some recyclables.
Yeah, ultimately, you know, obviously Billy, I mentioned earlier that he had a wardrobe change where he's wearing a little bit more raggedy clothes to fit in, but he also kind of had to since he had gross blood all over his last outfit, kind of ruined it a little bit. He's a little sweaty, if you know what I'm saying.
The Quad City laundromat was not open.
But ultimately, yeah, Billy shows up, he sees this act going down, and he's like, oh no.
Not on my watch.
But he also knows this boy is one of the deacon's little lapdogs, so he's basically going to force him into supplying the information that he needs. He's going to make sure that he gives him a direct connection to Deacon. Because Deacon is, as much as Johnny was a mirror for Billy, Deacon is the antithesis of everything Billy hates. Deacon is like the emperor to his Yoda. He's the ultimate bad guy. Even more than Mr.E is. He considers Deacon his nemesis.
I can't believe we went through a whole hour before making a Star Wars reference. Like, I'm proud of us. Like, yeah, I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, I tried.
Here comes a Tombstone reference, though. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You know, I'm coming and hell's coming with me. We just thought that was a really cool line. So, yeah, we ripped that straight from Tombstone.
Because at this point, he's a renegade. He's a rogue cowboy. And he's on a mission for vengeance. You know what I mean? And that was very much, you know, the thing with Tombstone was once they experienced loss, then they were all like, all right, that's it. Enough. You know, it's going down.
So this scene is one of my favorites, but it's also one of the funniest, and I'll tell you why. So it's one of my favorites because it's where we finally get to see more of that brute force we were talking about earlier, where Billy actually shows his badass side. And we get our first real fight scene, because the last scene, Billy, you know, he had the upper hand from the beginning. This scene, it's actually people try to participate and try to fight. What's funny about this scene, and there's some great performances in this scene. Dean Gleason's on camera right now playing Father Fontaine. Father Fontaine is literally just trying to get some people who will give him and his son time to get the hell out of Dodge. These people are not going to beat Billy Badass. There's no way they're going to beat Billy Badass, and he knows that. He just wants basically obstacles in the way to buy him more time. But one of the things that is the funniest part is we live in an area where there's a big Amish community. So as we're filming this fight scene where Billy is taking out all these people, doing all this stuff, what we did not realize, and I don't even know if Pat knows this story or not, But there was an Amish family who was watching this all go down, not realizing that it was a movie.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, because we had actually filmed right outside. It was shut down, but it was their Amish school.
Yeah, and so we're in the middle of doing this, okay, and we leave for the day, and that's when Cody Dennis gets a phone call from his father, essentially saying, hey, you might want to let the Amish know next time you're filming near them. But we couldn't let them know because we didn't know where they were. It was kind of difficult to do that. But Christian Fino is playing the character that you're seeing on the screen right now, kind of walking up to Billy Badass. And as you can tell, that's just not going to go very well for him as he's about to get knocked on his ass and out of frame, which I decided to keep in there. We could have cut a little earlier, sure, but I thought it'd be cool to show just the absolute brute force. And right here is one of my favorite parts of this movie. It's in the trailer too. Like, watch this shillelagh. It's going to come around and just knock this guy out. Freaking awesome. And that did take a lot to do, and all the makeup effects you're seeing in this is Chris Griffin. So we got to give Chris Griffin a lot of credit for how this whole scene turned out, because he absolutely made this work. And of course Billy's like, alright, I'll give you a second to try to work out your gun, but then I'm going to beat your ass. And then here comes James Quant again, who played a different character in this scene. And Patrick actually got this idea from a Dracula movie, I believe, right? With I'm gonna let you go out as a man.
Yeah. So one of the earlier influences for me was a film called Dracula 2000, and it was actually one of Gerard Butler's. If you've ever seen like 300, he played King Leonidas. Gerard Butler in the film goes up to one of his, he plays Dracula, and he goes up to a doctor when he's about to kill him, and the doctor's getting all quiet, and Dracula goes, shh, dignity, doctor, because he, of course, Dracula, he comes from an old world where, men typically didn't scream and cry, and obviously the doctor screamed anyways. This is one of the most humorous scenes where Billy, the point was he was crushing the skull, but we had so much fun with that. And there's actually a funny story. So we used a watermelon as a prop, and I'm gonna let Eli tell you this story about the watermelon.
So we went to Walmart because we wanted to get a watermelon, because a watermelon is, we use that for like the crushing sound effect of the guy's skull. And then Billy, of course, says, I just stepped in shit, which makes me laugh every time I see it. But when we went to Walmart to get this watermelon, Jim Moscatello and myself, we had went in, we were over by the watermelons, we were trying to figure out which one would work the best, and this other guy was there too, not a part of our production at all, just a regular shopper, and he was talking about how great the watermelons taste this year and how he's looking forward to having one, and Jim cuts him off mid-sentence and says, we ain't eating it. And the guy just kind of backed away like, what the hell else are you supposed to do with a watermelon? And yeah, obviously we use it for our movies. But Billy Badass, obviously he makes light work of these chumps, as you would expect, because he's Billy Badass. And now we are heading on the way to the church. Now, in the backstory of the deacon was obviously really into boxing, but he was also a preacher, which is why we call him the deacon. And that's why he holds himself up in an abandoned church. So right now he's just having a good time, and Father Fontaine's freaking out because he's like, dude, did you hear the news? And Deacon's not bothered by it. This was actually the last night of production that we filmed this scene.
Yes.
This was where Patrick was talking about. It's like 10 degrees outside, and we're indoors trying to do all this stuff and get it to work right. And again, Chris Griffin, huge shout out to him.
This room is actually the gym in the building that we were using. It was also the only room that had heat. so
it was our favorite room.
We filmed the sequence with Deacon, blowing off some steam, and then every other shot for the remainder of this sequence is freezing
cold.
It's freezing cold, and everybody's just doing their best to get the film made and be determined about it.
One of my favorite lines that Deacon just said is, if I know Johnny like I think I do, Johnny let Billy kill him and take the credit. And that's kind of funny when you think about it, because Billy didn't kill Johnny killed himself.
Right.
But right now, obviously Deacon's saying, I don't need to leave. and Father Fontaine saying, "We gotta go." So that's kind of what's going on there. And you're about to see Billy Badass come out of nowhere because that's what he does. So again, it was super cold. We're trying to figure out things. We did not have a stunt coordinator on set. We just had fun with it, you know. And I know that in future productions, obviously we'll have stunt coordinators, things like that. But for this, we were just having as much fun as we could. And I think the fight scenes come across okay in this film.
And we thought the sequence worked like, you know, the old samurais right before their last battle, you know, they put their hair up and like that's it, like absolutely going to war. Deacon, of course, gets the upper hand because like we said, he's a surgeon on an operating table. He knows where to hit, when, and with Billy being down, he absolutely takes full advantage of that.
And I will say, Pat is a trooper because Justice, who plays Deacon, was doing everything he could to not hurt Pat. But Pat wasn't telling Justice that every kick connected, so he was literally getting his ass kicked for you at home.
Deacon,
so I hope you enjoy it.
We wanted it to look as well. So because of the difference in our stature and stuff, and the fact that we really didn't have much rehearsal time, I really wanted it to look official. And there were quite a few moments there where Justice's character Deacon would hit, and it did, like he said, it connected, and he's literally just kicking the shit out of me while I'm laying on the floor.
And freezing.
And I was freezing. Yes.
I mean, that's a great way to spend your night, right? So here, this was actually, it had to be timed perfectly, because if it wasn't, it would have been a problem. But luckily, Pat didn't get hit in the face with that bat, because that was actually pretty scary for me at filming it, because I'm like, oh my god. But the guys were like, we got it, it'll be fine. So I just trusted them and it worked out. This part here was brilliant by Chris Griffin, makeup effects guy, with this nail going through Billy's hand. Pat, talk about that a little bit, because you guys had to work on that.
Yeah, that was actually really well done. So what it is there's a real nail, and it's suspended on the other side of that board with rubber bands, and then we had a fake nail that slid in between my fingers to hold it in place. So my hand connects, but it actually just pushes that other nail down onto the rubber bands, and it's completely it looks like the nail penetrated, but it took a couple of takes. The biggest issue we had with that was Chris and Cody got together and they built a platform for me to sort of fall into, and it was meant to be like a trap hole in the floor. However, that didn't quite go according to plan, because I'm so tall in real life, and we only had that about 3 feet off the floor, so it took a little bit to do it and to make it look as realistic as possible.
So these 3 rooms that Billy just went through, we had to do a lot to make it look like it was 3 consecutive rooms. But essentially, Deacon had all these different traps set for Billy that would hopefully take Billy out before he actually got where he was going. But Billy, again, Billy's not a dumbass who's just strong. He actually has brain cells, so he was able to figure out where to go, luckily. But we wanted to build a little tension in this scene before Billy has his face-off with Deacon here. So we have him climbing up into what's essentially the attic of Deacon's church. So that's kind of what we were trying to do there. And now we have the big reveal. So the idea here is that on either side of the rope is something that Billy cares about. So remember when Axel went to Stephanie's house and was like, Stephanie, help me, talk Billy off the ledge? Inadvertently, he let Gideon know where Billy's family was, so Deacon went and picked him up. And so on one side of the rope is Elizabeth, on the other side of the rope is Stephanie, and in the middle of it is Billy. And they're both hanging out the window right now, and if they drop, they die. So that's kind of the situation we were trying to convey. It was a little difficult trying to do that on an independent budget for what we had, but I think it comes across very well because of what Patrick does in this scene, and this is one of my favorite scenes that Patrick did in the entire film. Just the sheer emotion that he plays this with, strength, and ultimately, the loss that he has to deal with. I just think he did a really, really good job in this scene. Anything you have to add on that one, Patrick?
So, the way the scene is shot actually was inspired by Spider-Man 2, when he's like two webs trying to hold the train back, and so that was the point of that. But also, no, I agree with Eli's point. We really wanted to portray that. There's an old saying that one meets his destiny on the path he takes to avoid it. And that was kind of what we wanted to say, is there was no way Billy was going to win. Even if he won, he was going to lose. Every action has a consequence. And so we really wanted to portray that as angry as Billy is also angry with himself. In order to save his people, which he felt he had to do, he also had to sacrifice really what was left of his humanity in order to accomplish this, because Stephanie and Elizabeth were all he had left. So that just completely destroyed what was left of the man. At this point, going forward, he's nothing but the monster.
And like I said, I love the brutality in which Deacon dies, because again, we had to make that as realistic as we could. You might be wondering what Billy was punching. So because this was an old elementary school that had like a bunch of storage stuff in it, Billy was actually punching a headboard, like a plastic headboard that we put fake blood on, and that's what he's punching. But this scene here, I really love how it all came together, and we kind of tried to sell the idea here that obviously he lost his girlfriend and he lost his child, and it was all completely avoidable. If he just would have done what Axel said to do at the beginning, which was to just follow the rules and not rock the boat, he wouldn't have lost everything. Yeah, he would have had a kind of a crappy life, but he could have made the most out of that crappy life instead of risking it all like he did. So that's why we show the flashbacks in this scene. But I know this is one of Pat's favorite moments as well, because when I showed him the edit of this that I had done, he was like, dude, that's awesome. And again, a huge shout out to Stevie Lynn. She wasn't physically there, obviously, when we were doing the rope scene, but it was funny. I had sent her a message on Facebook, and I said, listen, we need to have like your voice in this scene because it's missing something. And she sent me back, I don't know where she was when she did it, but she sent me back the scream of Billy, save our kid and everything. So I just, in my own comedic way, I imagine her in the middle of the grocery store recording that with people being like, what's going on?
Whoa,
save our children. Yeah. But a huge shout out to her for adding that extra stuff to kind of add a little more to the scene. And I know Patrick was super self-conscious about this scene of like, how is it going to look at the end of the day? But I think he did a good job. And
listen, I'm just glad my pants held up. Obviously, I had to find the most raggedy thing that I owned that didn't really fit and be very physical. So, that worked out.
So there was a thought that I had during the editing process to actually end the movie right here. And I chose not to because I like the ending that we wrote out better. But there, for some folks, like, for them, it's like a completely different movie after this point.
Right.
But we're going to switch here. I believe it's 3 days later. Yeah, 3 days later. And I will say, like, looking back on it, I probably didn't need to do as many, like, 3 days later or a week later that I did, but I did. And this scene here, this was supposed to be in somebody else's house, but we ended up having to film it in my apartment. And you'll see Dean Gleason, who played Father Fontaine. You might say, wait a minute, I thought Father Fontaine died. Well, he did. This is his twin brother, as you'll hear him say. We kind of did the soap opera thing. But Billy is basically looking around in District 3 now, and he's trying to find the people of District 3 to let them know that they're not under Deacon's reign anymore. And we wanted to do this to kind of show the positive things that Billy's journey is doing, so that it's not just a bloodbath the entire time.
And one, it's a small inconsistency only because it was freezing that night, but the point of this look is it's been 3 days. Billy kind of passed out after after the defeat of Deacon, and like his wounds have set in. You see, he's got bruises. His clothes, his shirt was, sort of torn in the battle. He's more tattered than he was. Like this is a war-torn Billy at this point. Like this is the scars of what's happened, and so it really shows just how difficult and how physically destructive this whole conflict has been, other than obviously the emotional toll, which isn't really something that he can portray at this point. He's got to finish it. You know what I mean? So he's kind of compartmentalized that, and he's putting his feelings aside until he can end this.
And I do want to give a lot of credit to Dean Gleason in this scene for, stepping up and portraying two characters, because that originally was not the intention. Again, as Patrick has said, and as I have said throughout this, we were filming this throughout the pandemic. So, once we found our initial people, it was kind of hard to do further auditions. So a lot of the people in the original cast said, hey, I don't mind trying to play a different character. We can try to make it look like it's two different people. And in this case, he's literally Father Fontaine's twin brother, so it kind of works out. But Wise One, he's been trying to operate kind of like an underground railroad. I hate to use that as the example, but when I was writing it, that was the example. But Wise One has been trying to keep everybody safe in District 3 the best way he can while being trapped in his house, because Deacon doesn't want anybody outside their house. They're not supposed to be outside their house. And so he's kind of getting people food. He's assembled a system of some kind to be able to help the people who live around him. And now that he's learning that Deacon and Father Fontaine are no longer in power, that means all these people who live in District 3 no longer have to deal with that oppression, and they can actually live their lives. So, again, we didn't want this to just be a bloodbath or a kill after kill after kill. We wanted there to be a purpose to what Billy's doing, and the fact that he's freeing people as he goes along shows that there is meaning behind what he's doing beyond just his own selfish ambitions.
I also want to add that, I'm just now realizing, had I thought about it, we could have contacted Dean to ask him who was the provider of his wig, because it looks beautiful. And it just makes me want to ask what kind of conditioner he uses.
So, right now what they're doing is they're going outside of the church and they are passing out the food that was in the church. So that's why you'll see those boxes. And you could make the leap as an audience member that maybe the boxes they were preparing in District 1, here are those boxes here in District 3.
You also might be wondering why they're wearing masks to conceal their faces.
Yeah. So we had to do that because Cody Dennis played one of the people and Kaylee Dennis played the other person. And so we kind of had to keep it that way. Because otherwise you would notice, wait a minute, there's Axel.
So the in-universe reason for that is nobody wanted to be spotted out on the streets, so they wore masks to kind of conceal themselves if they were out at night, just so that their families didn't get reprimanded. And so they're not 100% sure that Deacon's really dead. They don't fully believe it yet, so they stayed in their disguise to go get the supplies, and of course, eventually everybody will kind of relax, but that's the most logical string of bullshit.
That sounds like a pretty turd. We'll use that one.
That's a pretty turd.
Seeds of rot and pretty turds. There
Seeds
you go.
of rot.
Seeds of rot. So right now, what's happening is Wise One, a few years back, was actually in touch with a Quad City millionaire. Quad City millionaire being folks who worked for Mr.E. And so he is giving Billy this information because Billy has now killed all the people that could tell him where to find Mr.E. And remember, the whole point of this is for him to find Mr.E., who he's never met before and doesn't know where to look for. So he's getting some valuable information here from Wise One to be able to continue on his quest. Kind of like a side mission in a video game. you don't really like doing them, but you kind of have to because it adds more to the flavor. So that's what's going on with this. It's basically, the unintended positive, I guess you would say, of him going and meeting Wise One was getting that information that would further his journey. And he's now also helped the family of Wise One and his daughter be able to be reunited. Here we're still in District 3, but now we're at a bar, and Christian Fino, once again, is in this scene. This is, I believe, the last role he plays in this, but he plays the bartender. And everything in this bar is absolutely free. And the reason why is because they're no longer oppressed and it's just a big old party.
Now this was one of the last scenes we did with Kat and I before the climax of the movie. And at this point we'd had a chance to work together a little bit and sort of rehearse a little bit more. So I do like the way this scene kind of plays out. We were far more comfortable with each other, and I liked that at this point in the film you're still kind of questioning her a little bit, like what her place is in all this, because this almost is a tender moment between her and Billy.
Yeah, she's there in District 3. We don't exactly know why she's there other than her making her rounds for Mr.E. And obviously she's hearing what's going on and what Billy's doing and how he shouldn't be doing it. So she kind of has her chance to try to talk him out of it in a way, because everyone else has, and no one else has gotten through to him. So here's her kind of taking her chance at it, saying, do you realize what you done and how all this was completely avoidable? This is her kind of taking that opportunity. We find out a little bit more about her backstory too. I do want to say a shout out to Kevin Pentelow, because Kevin Pentelow found us this bar in Brushton, New York.
Right.
And we had no idea this bar even existed. It was a closed bar, but the guy opens it up for, parties and things like that. And so Kevin got a hold of the gentleman who owns this bar, and he let us use this. So we were super excited. And again, like we've done before, we wanted to make sure that it didn't seem like it was just them in the bar. So we added the sound effects of more people in there, so to hopefully get you to believe that there's a party going on.
And unlike the last bar sequence where it was Billy and Axel talking and they were drinking sodas, it's because in real life that was a fire hall and no alcohol is permitted, whereas this scene is a legitimate bar and they are actually sharing a beer while having this conversation, which I want to say just added a little extra something to it, because I don't know about you, I can relax and have chemistry with just about anybody if I have a good beer.
And it probably tasted a lot better too than you pounding Coca-Cola in the
After
earlier
a while,
scenes.
yeah. The burps didn't, but certainly the flavor was on point.
So she sees, obviously, he's still injured, and continuity-wise, you might say there's a little bit of an issue there because he wasn't bleeding in the previous scene, and this is the same day.
And the bruise isn't as prevalent as it was in the last sequence.
So I'm going to toss it over to Patrick for him to beautify the situation. So go ahead. What explanation you got on this one?
So our absolutely tremendous makeup effects for Billy's damaged face was done by the lovely Mrs. Winfrey there. Cassandra did it, and I can't remember exactly what the deal was other than the fact that we didn't have a whole lot of prep time. So she was able to give Billy the damage on the side of his head and the hands. We got that somewhat down, and you could chalk it up to it was a sore on his head and the wound opened up a little bit, so she was just kind of helping to patch him. But if you'll notice, the bruise on his eye is there, but like not as bad. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that was just, we didn't really put a whole lot of makeup on because we knew the way we were going to be filming was going to be much more them looking at each other, so it was going to be much more of a side profile. So there wasn't much point in spending hours on the effects when you weren't going to see it anyways, because we also only had so long to film in the bar before we had to leave. They only had it open for us for a few hours, so we had to really get this in with as few missteps as possible, and then move on with our day.
And I'll also add that the last scene that you saw with Billy meeting Wise One, that makeup was done by Kaylee Dennis, and then the makeup in this scene was done by my wife Cassandra. Neither day did we have Chris Griffin there, which was a little unfortunate, but the ladies filled in. They did the best they could, but it was two different people doing it, whereas if you have that one makeup effects artist doing it the entire time, it's a little easier to keep continuity.
Right. Exactly.
And again, I appreciate the work that Kaylee and Cassandra both did because they didn't have to do it. But like I said, for filmmakers listening out there, continuity-wise, it's better when you have your whole makeup effects team on every day. But I do love this scene because I think Kat Kova killed it in this scene where she was talking about how, the government's supposed to work for you, and if they're not going to work for you, they shouldn't be there. And Billy's kind of like, in a way, he's kind of sounding like Axel. About, like, you shouldn't be trying to take away the establishment, even though that's exactly what he's doing. But it is different because he's talking about mobsters. Those mobsters shouldn't be there and oppress people.
What I love is the first time you see Kat and Billy interact, it's very patronizing. And while she asserts herself, she doesn't really go toe-to-toe with him. Where in this sequence, Billy's a brute. He's a big and dominant presence. And she really just hammers right back at him every time he tries to assert himself and intimidate and push back against what she's saying. She's right there with him, push for push. And the power dynamic and the power struggle between the two of them in the sequence really plays out quite well. And again, it's got that kind of that underbelly of sort of tenderness between the two of them, which I will say, if it seems like you're kind of wondering, like, are they gonna hook up? Like, are they gonna, like, what's the deal? Like, it kind of seems like they're going in a softer direction with it. That was absolutely intentional, only because what she does and who she is, she doesn't necessarily want to hurt Billy. She just doesn't feel like she really has a choice. So she was kind of trying to be nice to him and offer him a chance to end his crusade and go back to his district. And obviously, things do not play out that way.
So now the bartender, played by Christian Fino, is realizing who Billy is, and he was kind of talking to him about, like, hey, if I would have met the guy who killed Deacon, I'd give him free beers for life. And Billy's like, I'll have to remember that next time I'm in town. So kind of putting two and two together, if you will. We also wanted to make sure that there were, like, different characters throughout this film that could carry on the legacy, because obviously Billy's doing all this, but in this world, it's not like he's updating his social media status to say, hey guys, going to District 2, see you there. So some people will notice that people are going out of power but not know why. And so we wanted to leave behind people who could share on that legacy of what Billy is doing for these people in the future in the storyline. Now we're back with Axel. Axel, obviously, he's back at that house that Billy and him live at. And he is just kind of going through it. He is kind of like Eeyore in this scene in a way. Because he doesn't know what's going on with his brother. He hasn't heard from him in a little bit. But he also knows that if he doesn't give answers to Gideon Chase, something bad might happen to his brother and him. So he's just trying to find relief however he can. His way of doing that is reading a comic book. And you might notice on there, the comic book is Bisbick Hines. And that's actually a comic that R.W. Martin and our art director Jay Moores actually made together. And so we thought, why not put that in our movie? Because I thought that would be fun. So he's reading a Bisbick Hines comic while he is trying to relax and dealing with the pressure of having to be the guy while Billy is gone and wondering what's going on with Billy. So he is obviously going to go out of frame here to go do something. I don't know what. Don't have a reason to give you. But Billy is trying to call him, and that's why we put Billy's face there on the caller ID, so that would make sense.
That was from my Facebook.
Yeah, we just grabbed a random photo of Patrick, so...
It's because I had my hair perfectly feathered.
So now we see that Gideon Chase has actually broken into the place where Billy and Axel live, and here we go again with the intimidation. And if you are playing the drinking game, again, you're probably 3 sheets to the wind by this point, but Axel's about to be abused again. So take a drink.
At this point, you're probably drunk as a skunk and may have soiled yourself.
Oh my goodness.
There's alcohol poisoning. If you're playing the F-bombs game, you're probably dead. Don't blame us. Drink responsibly.
Well, they can't blame us if they're dead. I'm just kidding. So anyway, so right now he's listening to a voicemail from Billy. Billy's letting him know kind of what's going on, that he took care of District 3, and now he's coming back around to District 1 to kind of get a chance to talk to Axel again before he goes out on further to further his mission. But right now, at this point in the film, again, the only person left for Billy to take care of is Mr.E. So, and I remember that being another one of the drinking game, was every time somebody dies, finish your drink. So, my goodness. But again, I want to give credit to both R.W. Martin and Cody Dennis. I think they both did a really great job in this scene. And this was actually filmed at the beginning. Basically everything that you see with R.W. Martin was filmed in a 3-day period, and it was the first weekend of us filming this movie. So everything you see him in was all shot on pretty much the same 2 days, right, Pat?
Yeah. Actually, the last shot, I believe, of the film was actually the first shot that we did.
Yeah, one of the first shots, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how that all comes together in editing. But for me, a lot of that had to do with my own anxiety, because I had seen this production that I tried to do 3 times before fail. And so I wanted to make sure that I had a beginning and an end. In case something bad happened, I could at least put out a short film. Luckily, nothing bad happened, and we have the full film. So as we go on to this next scene, you're going to hear another song pop up, and I want to talk about that here briefly. So the song is from Noah McCarthy, and it's called Movements. And this was a song that Noah had recorded on YouTube a few years ago. But when I listened to it, I had stumbled across it, I thought it perfectly summed up the relationship between Billy and Axel. And so there's a sequence in here where it goes black and white footage. It's a flashback kind of showing the relationship between Billy and his brother. And we use that song in that flashback. And it's one of my favorite moments in the film. I also love the tension in this scene because unlike before, where Billy was trying to figure out what was going on with his brother in the basement, and Billy's trying to figure out what's going on with his brother over the phone, now he's face to face with his brother, and the Intimidator is standing right behind his brother the entire time in Gideon Chase. And I thought that added a tension to this scene that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So that's why we have Gideon kind of hanging out, and every time he says something questionable, we show him. So Pat, anything to add on this scene?
Well, I will say that that's a lot of soda. No, every time Billy sort of says something questionable, like he said, you kind of show Gideon in the background, and oftentimes, as soon as he does, and I don't think it was intentional so much as a choice on RW's part, that he immediately places his hand over his gun, which he has holstered in his pants, as though he's ready to immediately strike Billy if he needs to and take him out. One thing I thought was sort of interesting from this sequence is how he's like only feet away from him, but Billy is so defeated at this point in the story that he doesn't even realize he's being watched.
Yeah. And he still has that mindset like Pat talked about earlier, where he's compartmentalized everything and he's like, I just need to finish this. And we've played on the fact that Billy is smart, that Billy is a brute force, and Billy actually says in this scene, I haven't gotten this far by not having eyes in the back of my head. And it's like, well, if he would have used those eyes in the back of his head, he would have seen that Gideon was right behind him the entire time and been like, yo, what's your problem? Why are you listening into our conversation? Because he might not have been able to put 2 and 2 together that Gideon is going to try to hurt him, but he would have at least been irritated that this guy's, listening into the conversation between him and his brother, right?
Right.
But again, Axel, he wants to tell his brother what's going on, but he just doesn't. And that's what I hope really conflicts people when they watch this movie is I want people to go, Axel, just tell your brother what's going on. But anybody who's ever been in that type of situation where you have information that you want to tell somebody but you feel like you can't, you'll be able to relate to what Axel's going through. And hopefully you've never been in the situation where you're holding information back from somebody who might get killed. That would be horrible. But in this film, we play off of that to really heighten it. But these are two brothers who love each other dearly, and we wanted to make sure that that point got home, and I think this scene really did that. Now, here we go with the close.
Yeah.
You got to talk about this.
This is the big close sequence where, so originally, this is the one outfit that Eli had drawn out for Billy, and this was supposed to be like his outfit for the movie was slacks and a white t-shirt and suspenders, and I kind of told him, and it plays off that way in the movie where I kind of was like, are you kidding me? Like, you want your hero to wear that? He's gonna look ridiculous,
like the Stooges,
and like the Stooges, and but I agreed that I would do it, and so we fitted it in that way, sort of towards the end, and made it like, you know, it's the end of the world, sort of. A lot of society's fallen. He doesn't have a lot of clothes left. Like, that was the best thing Axel could find, and so that's what he grabbed him, kind of haphazardly, not paying attention. So that's just kind of the wardrobe he wound up with.
So here comes that song that I was alluding to earlier by Noah called Movements, and I would encourage you, go listen to our entire soundtrack. We have a 7-song soundtrack for Billy Badass. 3 of those songs are actually in the film. 4 of those songs got added afterwards, but they're all great. And what I'll say about shooting this particular part, the flashback part we filmed way, way early on in the process. And what was so great about it was raining that day. And luckily we didn't have to use any of the audio from that day. But the 2 fellas on the screen, Cody and Pat, they were just kind of figuring out, like, okay, what do we do here to look like we've been brothers for a long time? And so they did the arm wrestling thing. They read comics together. They looked at things, you know, and laughed and had a good time. But it was so funny because in the middle of filming that, we all felt stupid doing it. Right. But, like, it plays off well in the actual footage.
Right. And you might be wondering why it doesn't span, like, multiple days. And what it is, this is their last day together. Because you'll notice Billy's wearing the same outfit that he wears before he goes to the basement, and him and Axel have their last conflict. Is, you know, Axel kind of follows him to that basement, and that's where they have their conflict, and then Billy heads off on his journey. Like, this is their last day together.
Before that, yeah, last day before that conflict. So, but like I said, I'm super thankful to obviously everybody that was involved in the cast, but I'm super thankful to the musicians as well who allowed us to use their music, because they didn't have to do that. And I would encourage independent filmmakers out there, if you're watching this and you want to make your own movies, you know, look at some of the bands in your own area, you know, because if you get them involved in your film, chances are they're going to want to promote it just as hard as you do, because their song is in your movie. And furthermore, if you got a really talented cast, which you should, I don't know why you would go out and cast a bunch of people that aren't talented, but listen to that talent, because everybody wants you to have the best movie you can have. And I'm thankful that I did that on this production with the talent that was around me and with the musicians that we brought in too. So in this scene, to close out this scene, I should say, Axel knows now what he's done. He has set his brother up. Gideon now knows that he's going to the footbridge to meet with this Quad City millionaire based off information he got from Wise One earlier on. And Gideon was told, you need to bring Axel into our team for Mr.E. And Axel's like, listen, I don't want to join your team. I only did this because you were threatening my brother. But now, Axel obviously can't fight multiple people, so he gets abducted. So here we go with the footbridge. Now, this is really special because back before I got really into filmmaking, I was on Hard Times, and one of the things I would do when I was on Hard Times is I would go to this footbridge in Messina, New York, and it was kind of like a calming place for me. It was like a place to kind of recenter myself when the world didn't make much sense. And so we've used this film in our Batman fan film, but we also used it here. And what was really cool about that is there's actually a sign now there showing that Billy Badass was filmed there. So if you're ever in Messina, New York, and you go to the footbridge, you should see that sign. And that sign is talking about this scene here. But we as an audience know Gideon is there, not as the informant, but he has taken out the informant that was supposed to meet Billy, and now he's playing as an informant per se. So, Pat, anything to say about this scene?
It's like he says, it's the big footbridge sequence. RW and I had met the night before, and it was kind of we really didn't have much time to prepare for this, but we were both a little frustrated while we were filming this sequence because we were losing daylight so fast, and it really plays to the scene really well that it's getting dark, and we're both just frustrated and we're annoyed, and so that kind of played into it very well. And like Eli was saying, there's a sign there now. And actually, funnily, before him and I met, I also used to go to that spot quite a bit. So it was just kind of serendipitous, I guess, that the two of us eventually crossed paths and we became like family and did this film together. So very special, holds a special place for us.
So in this scene, obviously Axel's woken up from being knocked out, and he's en route to go to Mr.E.'s house or mansion, whatever you want to call it. But he is like, I gotta call my brother, I gotta let him know what's going on. And this is where the big reveal happens in this movie, where Axel says, wait a minute, working for her? What do you mean her? It was Mr.E. And so this is where we finally show you who Mr.E actually is, and it's somebody that you would have seen at the very beginning of the movie where we show Billy walking. You would have seen her at the bar. You would have seen her this entire time. It is, in fact, the representative who's not a representative at all. It's actually Mistress E, played by Kat Kova. And one of the reasons why we did this is because, a bunch of mob bosses who are dudes are not going to expect that the ultimate power is a woman. And so we kind of played off of that a little bit. But this scene here, I have seen a lot of people react exactly the way that I was hoping to, which is people are going, Billy, turn around, oh my God, no. So that worked out very well for us.
I don't think either of us came here to talk.
And of course now we kind of leave it to your discretion. Did Billy die? Did Billy not die? And the reason why I say that is because you saw the shillelagh fall and you saw the gun fall.
We've laid the seeds of rot.
So and that's the film.
That's it. That's the Ballad of Billy Badass.
So again, I just want to say thank you if you've watched this commentary, if you played the drinking game. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Hopefully you enjoyed, and make sure you look to the future for Eli's other productions. He's got more in the works, and in case you're curious about a sequel,
there is one written.
There is one written. We're just not going to say anything about it.
But again, I just want to say thank you, obviously, to the cast and crew, to everybody that helped make this movie happen. Again, a movie being filmed on an independent budget, that's hard enough. Filming it in the middle of a pandemic, that's super duper hard. And we were able to do it because of many, many great people assisting us throughout this process. So this film has become a success because of folks like you tuning in and listening to Patrick and I, banter and watching the film and buying the Blu-ray and all that good stuff. So thank you for that. And with that, I don't really have anything else other than to say, I hope you stick around for the credits, because there's one more song called Regrets by Ronnie Vegas, and that song plays about halfway through the credits, and it is the third of the 7 songs on the soundtrack. It is a really, really awesome tune. Patrick and I both like rock music. We both like, rock music that's acoustic a little bit, and so this song really was pretty awesome.
I would suggest that you have a little bite to eat. Make sure you drink some water, get some rest, and make sure you take good care of yourselves. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. And hey, rock on.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody.